Hi, Kai.
Hi,
It's nice to have you here.
thank you.
And I think we would want to know about a short background to you and what you do.
Yeah, so my name's Kyle Walker, the founder of E.P.I.C Psychology. I am a member of the British Psychology Society as a graduate member for chartered, as a chartered basis. I'm going into my PhD in behavioural and evolutionary psychology, and we help individuals understand themselves, understand their behaviour, their thought patterns, their thought processes. We help individuals move through previous pain and suffering potentially, and help them navigate and carve out a pathway for the future.
Oh, great. All right. So we live in the most information-rich time. Like in the history, I don't think we've had it this good.
Yeah.
But why do you think people are still thinking less deeply than they ever did?
People think less deeply. I think potentially we've got a lot of information, right? So the wealth of information and the availability of information is more than we've ever had in history before. So I'll give you an example. If I had a belief about the world being governed by orange pixies, I'm sure I could find a forum online which would, feed me information about that particular belief, whether it is factual or not. And I think it stopped people from colliding thoughts together and creating their own sort of, views and perspectives. We formulate our own worldview based on other people's information, right? And depending on how popular, shall we say, that worldview is, will be dependent on how that information potentially steers our culture as well.
Would you call that group thinking?
Yeah. I think when we fall in line with ideals or popular opinions, we completely negate our own thinking process. We stop thinking for ourselves, for example, and what we do is we just take on information, collective information, availability cascades, and we formulate our worldview based on other people's perceptions, which is arguably, one of the main reasons why I truly believe that human beings have lost the ability to think.
I think that is actually leading me to my next question, which I think in part you have answered, and it's basically what's the difference between having information and actually thinking.
Okay. So think about having a box, right? And we fill the box with things, information. If we fill our box with a particular type of information, the box sort of gets more, condensed and concentrated around one particular sort of viewpoint. Okay. Now, when we do that, we find that there's a lot of conflict because people have concentrated their information to such a degree. There's no room for other people's opinion because they've just filled their box, shall we say, with the available information. Now, this completely sort of stops people from, when you've got no room, no cognitive flexibility, shall we say, we lose the ability to bring two thoughts together and collide them, shall we say, and entwine them and, observe, potential different outcomes to, that thinking process, that thought process of evaluating, of analysing, of, thinking of different perspectives, different sort of, outcomes. And we just, it takes a lot of effort to do that, right? It's like if I turned around to you and said, right, what's 12 times 35? We go into this mode of thinking where it takes effort, right? Yeah. And because the brain is such an energy demanding organ, in fact, it's the most energy demanding organ in your body, it likes to be energy efficient, okay? So thinking takes energy. When we bring two opposing viewpoints together, especially if I disagree with the alternative viewpoint, it's so easy for me to just dismiss the alternative viewpoint, become defensive of my own, because the cost of the energy cost of trying to bring those two thoughts together completely outweighs the cost of me just defending my point. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so much easier for me to stand and defend my own viewpoint, even if I know I'm potentially factually wrong. I would probably argue that a lot of people would rather defend a viewpoint even if they know they could potentially be wrong, because the cost is less than conceding to stupidity, shall we say.
Yeah, definitely. So, with the ubiquitous of information all around us, do you think modern technology is making us smarter or just reactive? Just, I think, in part you've answered that in the last question I asked, where you talked about defending your viewpoint instead of trying to see the viewpoint of others and like juxtaposing with yours and all. Do you think technology is making us smarter, or we're just being reactive?
I think we're at a point in life, through our culture and through our technological advances, and I think we've been to these points before, where I think things are moving really fast, right? In the technological advancements of AI, you can ask it anything. You know, it can be a therapist, it can be, you know, a doctor, it can be a nurse, it can be whatever you want nowadays. It can be a teacher, and I think we've come to this a point again where the technological advances have sped up to such a degree where we haven't quite caught up with it yet. Do I think it's making us think less? Yes, absolutely. Do I think it's going to be of a detriment for the future? I would argue no. And the reason I would argue no is because there have been many times across history, you know, where human beings have done things. We used to stone women, you know, for believing they were witches. We used to take Christians to the Colosseums and feed them to lions, and it was normal. We used to have the slave trade. We used to have all these, you know, things that when we look back, we go, hold on a minute, potentially not ideal for you know, a civilization. And although, you know, we could say that the technological advances aren't predicated on harming human beings directly, like those examples I've just given, I think we are at a place now where we're starting to understand that we do need to be very careful with how we move forward with it. And I think for us to understand how to navigate these new experiences and these new technological advances properly, first we surely must know, you know, be affected by them in a way where we aren't, you know, as, you know, careful with them, shall we say. So we have to get things wrong before we get things right. That's what I'm trying to say in a nutshell.
Okay.
And I think that's where we're at now with it. Do I think it's damaging? Yeah, I think it is, but I think also that is a necessity for the future orientation with the technological advances. Yeah.
Okay. I think this next question will delve into what you actually do, and the question is, what is metacognition, and why do you believe it's one of the most important skills people can develop?
Yeah. So metacognition is simply thinking about your own thinking. It separates you from the identification with thought, shall we say. Let me try and give an example. So when we look at identification with thoughts, shall we say, when we think a certain way, that usually drives our emotions, drives our behaviours, right? If we're in an emotional state, we have a thought process, maybe a commentary about the emotional internal state, and then that again, you know, acts out in behaviour. So we're almost driven by thinking and by emotions and internal stimulus, metacognition separates you from that. So it allows you to look in to, as an observatory, from an observatory perspective. And it stops the identification of thought, and it stops us becoming our thoughts. So to just give an example, when we look at ourselves as human beings and we say, right, who is Aberdeen and who is Kyle, you know, we list the particular, we list some properties like my hand, my eyes, my head, my jumper, my voice, my thoughts, right? So when we're talking about identification, the list is almost endless, right?
Yeah.
Because then we can even say things like my house, my job. And we attribute all these things outside of us and inside of us, thoughts, to our identity, right? So my thoughts. And then when we do this, these types of identifications with these particular properties govern our orientation, our movement through life, our behaviour. So arguably, you're kind of like a sitting duck. You're strapped into a roller coaster, and you're just along for the ride. Now, metacognition allows you to break free from that and dictate whether a thought is useful. Is it an old pattern? Is it positive? Is it negative? Does it help my community? Does it help me? Is it going to help me elicit the best outcome to this specific circumstance? So this is me now, using metacognition to an internal thought. So if my internal thought was, oh my God, I'm useless, society is such a pain at the moment, it doesn't help anybody get on the business ladder, shall we say, or the property ladder. Okay then, Kyle, so let's break that down a little bit. So what do we mean, number one, by, this stops me? So what elements of that thought process give me evidence that it would stop me from getting on the property ladder? And even that question alone completely answers probably, the negative sort of presupposition of the question, right? Because the internal dialogue is, I can't because of this. So then when you break down, you say, right, let's look at the evidence. Yeah, you might find evidence currently, current social situation, the economic situation. Yes, it's very difficult to start a business. But now you see, I'm not saying these things are the reason why I can't do it. I'm actually saying that they are potential, difficulties and things that I'm going to have to navigate. So I'm almost immediately ameliorating myself of those limitations, because I am using the metacognitive, principle of looking at that initial thought and then stripping it back. It's like an information reduction. Let's look at it from an information reduction perspective. When we're looking at human performance, we look at something called information reduction. So if I had a number, 56 for an example, we'd want to know, say for an example, the internal dialogue is just the number, the 56. Metacognition is the information reduction. So how did we get to 56? How many different pathways could have got us to 56? So we could have said, right, 27.5 plus, sorry, my maths is awful, but you can break the sum down, and you can break the sum down a multitude of ways, right?
Uncountable ways.
Uncountable ways. But initially, the first thought is 56.
Yeah.
Or I can't do this because of this. So then if we do that information reduction using metacognitive techniques, you are almost showing multiple pathways to that position. So I would like to become, a famous and world-renowned psychologist. Okay, so let's have a look at the people in that position. Or my initial thought, oh my God, I'm not good enough. I'm full of tattoos. I've had a terrible upbringing. I was adopted, and all these other reasons why I can't, statistically would give me no chance whatsoever. Well, okay, let's have a look at the current world-renowned psychologist. how did they get there? Let's reduce down that information and see how they got there. And then let's have a look at some of the evidence of, where I am now as an individual. Me, personally, no GCSEs, and now I've got my PhD, doing my PhD in evolutionary and behavioural psychology. I'm regarded as a behavioural scientist. 10 years ago, I had no GCSEs, so let's reduce down, So for me to become the man I am here, sat here today, we reduce it down. So we go, right, spend 6-7 years working for the NHS, worked for the probation service for a period of time, did my master's in forensic psychology, did my undergrad 3 years in in psychology, did my A-levels, did my GCSEs. Prior to that, I used to read book after book after book, incessantly. So for somebody to get to a position, we break down its, reduce it down to smaller properties, and we follow the same trajectory. And usually, with a little bit of adjustments here and there, you are only limited by your own thoughts, because we identify with them as who we are. So as soon as they mention anything to us, it's, oh my God, that's the truth. And for the most part, Aberdeen, is the thoughts that we do regurgitate in our own minds are other people's perceptions or things that we've taken on as truth from what we've heard from other people. Maybe your parents were like, you'll never do anything well in life, or your teachers were like, you're awful, you're terrible, or, we absorb this and then we regurgitate it in the mind, identify with it as mine, like my hand, but that's just a singular property, isn't it?
Yeah.
The thing that is beyond that is the metacognitive awareness, the observation of self.
That's profound. Yeah, so my next question would be, why do intelligent people still make terrible decisions?
So if you look at things like the wisdom of the crowd, if we're talking about intelligence, well, number one, we need to clear up our premise of what is intelligence exactly, right? So years ago, we used to measure intelligence using IQ methodology, and we still do it now for some strange reason. And we believe that the speed to which somebody processes information shows their level of intelligence. The speed to which they process information shows their level of intelligence. Now, you could argue from 100 different standpoints how there could be many other factors which would make somebody intelligent, right?
Yes.
So, for an example, in my research currently, we're looking at adverse childhood experiences, so traumatic experiences in childhood. And the research is changing now, because they used to look at impairments in cognitive ability. So people who had been through trauma wouldn't do good on aptitude tests, as opposed to those who hadn't had any adverse childhood experiences, right? But only a bit. So people who hadn't gone through adverse childhood experiences did better on average than those who had on these intelligence aptitude tests. Now, the research has shown now, so they called it an impairment, a cognitive impairment, right? The research now shows that if you give the two groups, so those with adverse childhood experiences and those without, the same aptitude test, the same intelligence tests, but created an element of unpredictability and risk, those who had the adverse childhood experiences did significantly better than those who hadn't on the same test. So how's that an impairment? Because there are times in life where we need people to assess risk real quickly and be able to, navigate unpredictability, right?
Yeah.
So people with adverse childhood experiences who were initially seen as people with cognitive impairments, I would argue was almost a superpower, or an adaptation at least of the same system, because it's an adaptation of the same system. The people who haven't been through adverse childhood experiences will be less inclined to, perceive threat where there potentially could be threat, or, get themselves in a position to move into an unpredictable environment. Those who have had adverse childhood experiences are better at doing so, right? So that's not an impairment at all. In fact, I'd say that both were equally as important as each other.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at intelligence again, it's like we need to start really deducing it down to some other properties as opposed to the speed to which somebody processes information.
Yeah, definitely.
I would argue that the emerging literature, and especially the stuff that I've been looking at, metacognition in and of itself is the overarching standpoint or viewpoint we should be looking at intelligence from. How good are you and I at observing our own thinking and internal working models and navigating them to such a degree where we behave in a way which best serves ourselves now and moving into the future, not only ourselves but our communities and our families and our society. Mic drop.
I think that is good, but which also brings me to the next question about disagreement. Why do you think disagreement is so important for good thinking? You talked
Great
about boxing people into not being smart enough because they've had childhood trauma or some sort of childhood trauma.
Yeah.
So, say someone has disagreed with these thoughts before the research you're talking about
Yeah.
came up. Would it be so important? How important would it be in the grand scheme of things?
Well, I think the question has its answer. When we look at, so we live in a culture now, sadly, and this may offend people, but you know this will prove its point. So we live in a society now, sadly, where there's a lot of policy and legislation in regards to offence, like making offence or offensive communication. But in this policy and legislation, it doesn't stipulate what offence is exactly, which is a terrible long-term strategy, because I get to decide then what is offensive and what isn't offensive. Well, I could regard this interaction today as offensive, Aberdeen, and I am quite offended. But do you see what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So I get to, if the policy and legislation doesn't stipulate what offence is, then how can me and you sit down and have a discussion about two topics that maybe, how can we collide two ideas together to get something new if I'm afraid of offending you and you're afraid of offending me?
And if they're all in agreement all the time.
100%. So people fall back to, or they'll just reside to the loudest noise in the room, shall we say, or the loudest bit of information which is currently being, put through, is readily available. And by God, if you think differently, if you think differently, then who do you think you are? This is the new thing. This is the way our culture is now. It's acceptant of everything. It's like, if we accept everything, then we create chaos. Say, for example, everything in the world's just accepted. That would mean crime would be accepted. Everything should be accepted a certain way. So it creates chaos. There needs to be some order, and to bring about order, we need to be able to have uncomfortable conversations. I don't agree with this premise, this premise, this premise. I know that you do agree with it. So can you enlighten me to maybe help me shift my perspective and help me learn something? And if on that journey I learn something and you learn something, what else? What about if we actually bring about something new as well? A new topic to discuss,
So what you're essentially saying is it's better for you to listen to understand, not just listen to respond.
Yeah. Well, we all do it, I'm susceptible to that every now and again, and unless I use metacognition, and this is a perfect example of, if anyone's listening to this, this is maybe the first, maybe your first exploration of metacognition, and that would be when somebody's talking in an interaction, I can sometimes find myself responding internally before they've even finished, right? And a lot of us can do that, especially if we're passionate. we're excited. If we disagree, we could be creating an argument in our head.
Especially if we disagree.
100%. But this is the thing, right? So I've stopped listening.
Yes.
You're halfway through. You're halfway through putting your premise on the table, but I've just stopped listening as soon as I've disagreed with it. And in my head, I'm already setting you up for an argument. You ready? We're ready to go to war because we're going.
Yes.
And in my mind, and if you think about it, my internal working model is a representation of that because I'm already creating the war, right? You're speaking, and I'm already going, no, I don't agree with no. Well, no, he's wrong because of this. You know, and we just completely lose the ability to communicate because you might then say something while I'm formulating a response which would dilute my defense, right?
Yes.
Might dilute the defense straight away. So I would say that for anybody potentially watching, if you'd like to maybe explore metacognition, this is a brilliant one, Aberdeen. Well done. This is a fantastic question. So the next time someone's speaking to you and you're formulating a response in your head, become aware of it. Pause. Stop and go and be aware. And I can imagine, I can guarantee that while you're preparing the response and you go, hold on, I'm preparing a response, it will stop. And I will then be able to carry on listening to what you've got to say. It might, after a few seconds, start going, oh yeah, but no, I'm going to listen. I'm not going to prepare a response. I'm just going to keep listening. Maybe he's going to give me the answer that I'm trying to formulate here. So
good. So what would that now translate to? For instance, you were talking about people that were able to process information fast. Thinking about that, would that not mean they say if you have someone that processes information fast and you are in a discussion with them, you have a different view of a particular topic, wouldn't that mean they are also formulating response before you are able to finish your argument?
Yeah, you got it in a nutshell. So for an example, I would say that the ability to measuring human intelligence by the ability, the speed to which somebody processes information. Okay, so let's say if me and you went into a discussion, a dynamic of, we both want to get something out of here. There's a tussle here. Say for example we have disagreement. There is a tussle. There's a play here. There's like, this is my premise. You disagree. Tell me. Let's see if we can find some common ground. Let's see if I can. I would say this is where a good discussion will come from. Although I disagree, I would like to leave this conversation better off, with more understanding, and I would like to leave you potentially better off with more understanding. If we can manage those particular outcomes, at least let's have a civil discussion and not allow it to make us dislike each other.
Yeah.
Just because of a different viewpoint, right?
Definitely.
Because we all have different viewpoints, right? So, yeah, I think the IQ and the fact that it was initially, created a long time ago in a campaign it started in America. The eugenics policy, was it eugenics policy? I might got that wrong. Eugenic policies, I think, which basically said that they created this IQ test because they wanted people who scored highly in the IQ test to have more children.
Oh.
So it was like genetic engineering, social engineering, right? But that's where IQ first come out, and I've just landed one as well. Interestingly enough, the Herberts, who created the IQ test, right? Hear this out. The man who created the IQ test didn't publicly, or nobody ever has known about it, and he most definitely didn't publicly take the test himself.
Oh.
So we don't even know the IQ level of the man who created the IQ level, the test, right? Yeah. So can you understand the contradiction there, right?
Yeah,
so he was almost like, He might have taken it. I would argue he took it behind closed doors and didn't
Yes.
score that high and went, oh, I can't really say. Because if you're making a test on intelligence, right, you know. But
Obviously, you should have publicized yours.
I think it's a contradiction. Like I think it's a well sought out contradiction that the guy who created the measurement that we still use to this day to measure intelligence refused to take the test himself. So how intelligent was he exactly? So anyway.
So, how can you tell when people are reacting emotionally instead of thinking clearly? It just goes to same in line with the question that we've discussed. Like, how do you tell if, say, you are having an argument with someone? How are you able to spot these people are reacting emotionally instead of thinking clearly or metacognitively?
I would argue that over defensiveness would be a marker for emotional responding. Fast communication, interruption. During this dynamic of us having a conversation, I'm not predicating myself to be perfect here because I'm far from it, but I haven't once responded to anything that you've asked before responding, physically, shall we say. Slowing down, would give me, insight that the individual's thinking about his response, right?
Yes.
If I sat here going, yeah, but listen, if we look at IQ test and we look at the world and we look at the guy who created the IQ test, right? Oh my God, he was so wrong. He didn't he didn't even do the test himself, did it? I'm hooked in to my emotion because, listen, that kind of topic is a little bit, I do sometimes sit here and think, how on earth have we as a human race been so stupid to, still measure our intelligence from a man who created it who wouldn't take the test?
Yeah.
So there is some emotional anchor in there because it's like, can we just not understand this? Yeah. But the way that we've just spoken about it a moment ago was, I would say, this is the use of emotional intellect, emotional intelligence, and metacognition. So if we look at those two combined, right, I would argue that they would be a good marker for human intelligence. Not just the only ones, but I would say that they were most definitely two very good markers for when we look at intelligence, right? Say for an example, we said, right, we're going to send a spaceship to Mars to look for what? Intelligent life, right?
Yes.
That's what we say.
Yes.
Intelligence life. So the argument then is, okay, so then what would you expect to see within intelligent life, right?
How intelligent is it?
Sustainability, a community that builds itself and works for the greater good of each other. But that doesn't mean a culture who will buy into or be tyrannically overpowered by a subset of that species. Say for an example, if we went to another planet and we saw some aliens, shall we say, and all these aliens were falling in line because this subset of aliens, this little group of aliens on the planet, were dictating to them all how to think and what to do and where to go and what jobs they should be taking, what genders that they should be, what we should accept, what we shouldn't accept, telling us when we can eat, when we can sleep, when we can drink. I'm not saying that happens in ours, but I wouldn't regard that kind of species as an intelligent species.
Yeah.
Right?
Why do groups sometimes make brilliant decisions and other times they make disastrous ones?
Well, again, you go into groupthink then, so crowd intelligence. Like, if you look at social conformity, for an example, so if me and you walk down the street Aberdeen and we look up to the sky and we stop, there's a particular percentage of people who will stop and look up in the sky. If there was 5 of us who walked down the street and stopped and looked up in the sky, that percentage would increase, so more people would stop and look up. So this is, social conformity. Now, in groups and in teams, if you have somebody who is very loud or influential, the first piece of information that they give to the team the team will anchor in on. So they will base their, formulation of what comes next based on that first initial piece of information, which has come from the loudest person in the room, especially if they're intimidating, especially if they're, in a position of power within that organisation or that team, especially if, the individuals in that team want to,
Impress them?
impress and things like that, right? So what happens is immediately in that dynamic, we dilute and almost eradicate everybody's individual intelligence, and we're now anchoring on one singular person's intelligence, right? But there are particular psychological parameters which can be, put into place, which allows freedom of thinking and freedom of intelligence of the group to be entwined and integrated. And there are particular psychological parameters which create that environment. But again, when you look at things like groupthink, so I love the saying, and I'd like to share this one, because everybody knows the saying, a jack of all trades, a master of none, right? We all know that saying.
Yeah.
But the actual real saying, the full philosophical concept is a jack of all trades, a master of none is always better than a master of one.
Oh.
A jack of all trades, a master of none is always better than a master of one. And the reason that is when we look at expertise, yes, expertise has its place. I'm an expert by experience and, expert through my qualifications as a psychologist and behavioural scientist. You are an expert in what you do. But I would argue that we can be very rigid within our domains of understanding of the particular subject, especially when we're not inclined to absorb other people's perspectives, communication going from earlier. And even that, right, there will be things and domains in other subject areas which could benefit your subject area and benefit my subject area. Now, if we don't create the right parameters for those ideas to be shared, we only ever are left with the individual intelligence, right, as opposed to the group intelligence or the broader field of subject knowledge, shall we say. So at E.P.I.C Psychology, we actually create frameworks for companies to be able to structure problem-solving strategies, future orientation strategies, team-building strategies, team cohesion, through the wisdom of the crowd theory and principles. The companies that we've worked with so far, once they've established that structure, the improvement in and quality of thinking and outcomes is upward of 89%, 92% on our current data that because we measure across time, and the numbers speak for themselves, and it's really quite simple. Some of the parameters are real simple.
For an expert like you, it is simple.
Yeah.
So, why do you think our past experiences shape the way we interpret other people's behavior? Like, how does our past experiences make us prejudge people?
Okay. Yeah. So let's go back to so how do our past experiences, predicate our behaviour in this moment? So let's go back to adverse childhood experiences. People who've been through pain and suffering when they were younger, threatening environments. Okay, the cost. So in this, say for example, someone's again gone through adverse childhood experiences, and then when they grow older, they're outside of those environments, right? So they're in the normal environment now, but because their adaptations to those threatening environments are still, very ingrained in the executive functioning of that individual, the cost of getting a threat wrong is what?
Higher.
The cost of getting a threat wrong is the cost of life, potentially, at its maximum. So to perceive a neutral environment as threatening from somebody who was raised in a threatening environment is cost effective, right? Because if I get it wrong, I'm in trouble. If I get it right, if I get it wrong, if I get it wrong, the future consequence is not going to be great for me because I'm going to keep pushing people away, or I'm going to perceive threat where there aren't. Or if I get it wrong, it's going to play out later on. If I get my threat response right, I'm going to be okay. I'm safe, right? Because I'm going to be able to protect myself from the environment.
Traits, yes.
Yeah, but yeah, if I continue to get it wrong, so if I perceive threat where there are none, I'm going to untangle my future when it comes down to social interactions, social integration, romantic interactions, because I will perceive neutral stimulus as threatening.
Yes.
But again, when I was younger, the cost of getting that wrong was, I'm in trouble, serious trouble. So, yeah, it's our past experiences shape, our decisions and how we view the world. But it doesn't mean that that's fixed forever, right? So long as we can all understand that, And again, we'll go straight to it. The first way out of that is metacognition. I observe my threat response. I observe my internal response before I play out the response, right?
Yeah.
Is this thing that I'm feeling inside an interpretation of my past history, and is it a true representation of what's in front of me?
We're going back to metacognition.
Metacognition. So again, intelligence is derived by what? I would argue to be able to make the best out of every moment by being self-observatory, by observing the self internally and not being dictated by those previous experiences, right?
Profound. Now this will feel more personal because it's a personal question. What made you personally want to understand the human mind?
Yeah. Okay, so I've just done, obviously, for those who know my work, there's just been a documentary released about my previous life, shall we say, my previous character, the monster within, they call it. And I believe it's my purpose. From being born into this world, I was immediately met with threat. My mother put cigarette butts out on me, set fire to a room with me inside. My father got murdered. Didn't do very well at school, but I was adopted. This is the key thing. So I was adopted into a beautiful family. Never wanted for nothing. Never, been on holiday. Been to Disneyland America, Disneyland Paris. Been on, 2-3 holidays a year. My father was a business owner. My mum was a loving, doting wife and mother. But my behaviour was still very hostile, very, violent and hostile. And there was a pinnacle point in my life where I tried to take my own life. And after that point, I was in this tussle with God. Why are you keeping me here? All this stuff that's happened to me, and you've even put me in a loving home, and yet still I'm this monster. I'm consumed by this monster. And then I started reading books. I wanted to know why. Why can a beautiful environment nurture a monster the way that it did? Because I was, very hostile. I wasn't a very nice person. So when I started picking up books and understanding about who I was and, my first 4 years of life, my first few years at least before I was adopted, I don't know my own name. I don't know anything. I don't know this is a chair. I don't know this is a microphone. I don't know closet. No, nothing. I'm absorbing everything. The only two things that I can feel as a child is positive effects and negative effects, right? Positive something that feels good, something that feels bad. That's it. We can't even name them, right? So when you're a baby, you can't feel something and go, oh, wait there a minute, that must be jealousy. Oh, wait there a minute, oh, that must be frustration.
There's no label for
No.
feelings.
No, there's either a positive effect or a negative effect. Now, my first few years of life, because there was just a continuous negative effect and pain, things hurt and pain, and when I was crying out for my needs to be met, and I was, malnourished, I was left in day-old nappies, so none of my needs were being met. My initial creation of this world was dangerous. You're gonna have to fight for your survival here.
It's every man for himself.
Yeah, exactly that. Me against the world, and if anyone wants to watch the documentary, Who Am I? They can. It's on our website and on YouTube. So I won't go into it into great detail. But even simply like at school, I didn't integrate with kids at school very well because of my adoption. It was a bit of a taboo back then. So I created this monster. There was a monster created to protect. I always go back to this, and I can never describe it any other way. That monster was created to protect that small boy that was put inside that hotel room when his mother set it on fire and left him inside, and he had to be saved by the fire brigade. That was the pinnacle point of suffering for me. So in order for my survival, in conjunction with those experiences, a monster was created, a monster was born, and I take full responsibility for everything that he did. I take accountability for everything that he did. And oh God, you're going to catch me off guard here, Aberdeen, mate. Because there is a relationship with him still. Because I'm so grateful that he would go to the lengths that he went to protect that small boy when nobody else would. And although, like I've said in the documentary, although it didn't serve me or the people around me well at all, how could I have hatred for him? And now he's integrated, so I've integrated him very well. He knows he has no control over me whatsoever. He knows I am a strong man by having those elements of me under voluntary control. And if anything, I would say he is an asset now. He's an asset. Before he wasn't an asset. He's causing chaos and destruction everywhere. But I would argue now I still have the capability to cause harm, physical harm to anybody. But I would choose every other option other than doing that every time, unless you back me and my family or me and my son into a corner, or me and my, if I had a wife, me and my wife were walking down the street and 3 men came up to us and said, we're going to take your wife and we're going to pass me your wallet. Oh, okay, we'll just unlock that cage and let that monster out, and then we'll see how far you'll get. You won't get far at all. I almost think is necessary. Necessary to such a necessary in such a way that we're in World War now, right? We're potentially going into World War. What type of men and women are we all stood behind? Men and women who have the capacity for violence and aggression, but who have it under voluntary control. We are a necessity. Those parts of us are a necessity. Saying that any man, particularly men, who say, I am harmless, therefore I am good. Jordan Peterson says this beautifully. Any man who says he is harmless, therefore he is good, is not a virtuous man. You are just harmless. In essence, you are weak, because if you are harmless, you will get tyrannically oppressed by those who aren't harmless, right? But you will get oppressed by those who aren't harmless and don't have that side of them under control. Who will look after those types of people? Those who have those capacities, but
Choose.
choose to have them under voluntary control. We are a dying breed, but a necessity. We are necessary.
All right. If people want to improve their lives, what is one thing that they should start developing today?
Read. The best way to start developing your life is knowledge, I would argue. For me, it most definitely was. And again, I don't like to say that my path's everybody's path, because it's not. But what I've found in my practice is, we do a lot of interventions which are guided by some forms of therapy. We do a lot of metacognitive therapy, which is beautiful. But all of our interventions are guided by schema therapies or schema theory. We look at internal working models, attachment theories. We look at everything through a psychological lens and perspective. Now, I've found that the techniques and interventions that we use, which are informed by all these different prospects of therapy and psychology, they really do help nurture the individual. But the big aha moments that I have seen in every single one of my clients so far is wow, I get it. I understand why. It makes perfect sense. Of course I am this way. Look at what happened to me. How was I supposed to be any other way? I've adapted to something. And that gives you an element, it gives you an element of a few sort of prepositions here, because then it's like, okay, so that almost immediately makes me responsible now, right? Because I'm not saying I am this way because, of what happened to me. I am this way, there's nothing I can do about it because, of course I'm this way because, this happened to me and this happened to me, and we're handing all the accountability to everybody. What we're saying is, oh my God, I can see now why. Of course I would be this way, because this is what happened to me. And we immediately, it helps us take accountability for that. And it's that understanding why, why am I like this? Why do I behave like this? Why do I keep reacting the same way in my relationships? Why do I keep acting and reacting the same way when I get a new job and I disagree with my boss? Why do I keep acting and reacting the same way when someone cuts me up in traffic? Why do I do it? Because it doesn't benefit me, right? Especially if it doesn't benefit you. Like, why am I doing that? Okay, we establish that. We do some, what I like to call cognitive mapping, so we look back at where it came from, and then we say, okay, so what would we like to change? What are we going to build? What are we going to find? And we turn some people's concerns into strengths. If someone comes to me who's highly aggressive, just as we've spoken to a minute ago, I'm working with some individuals at the minute who've just come out of jail for some pretty, rough crimes. Now, turning around to those individuals and saying, your aggression is awful, don't be aggressive, it's terrible. We're going to therapize, we're going to give you loads of therapy so you're really passive and you become harmless. That's what we want. We don't want you to be aggressive. We want you to be harm. Please, you're setting the individual, and I'd even argue your community, up for failure because he's aggressive. So let's get that under control, and let's have that to be an asset for him and his community. Again, we go to war. Who are we going to call upon? We're going to call upon those types of men and women now. So, yeah, I think that knowledge, understanding who you are, is the foundation to which you can build from.
I think this is the last one, which is what's the most dangerous thinking habits people have today?
The
In your opinion,
dangerous.
the most dangerous thinking habits.
It's a tough one. The most dangerous thinking habit. Anything to its extreme. Far left, far right. There you go. The most dangerous, far left, far right. because they both predicate the same thing, right? The far right, if you look at the extremity of a belief, especially when it has severe damaging consequences to everybody, even especially a culture,
Lives
right?
and properties.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, but what the far left and the far right don't understand is they're the same problem, right? Because the far right go, these are our views, these are our, this is how we think everybody should be. You're wrong. Everybody's terrible. If you don't fall in line, you should be eradicated.
Yes.
What do the far left say?
Same thing. Basically,
Same thing. I'm going to say it. It's the same as the Nazis. It's the same as the Nazi regime. This is our viewpoint. This is how we believe everybody should be. If you do not fall in line, we'll kill you. The far left did it to Charlie Kirk. They shot him through the neck. The far right do it. They kill people because they don't believe in what they believe in. Right? That's how extreme. So yeah, I would argue that the most dangerous thought processes or beliefs are the extreme ones. Yeah, the extreme.
Regardless of where you fall, either left or right.
Yeah, you could. Hey, listen, you could be right, you could be left, and you could have a discussion, and you could come to some common ground. No problem. But you keep going further and further and further and further. You get to the same point.
Yeah.
Eventually, just different opinions and views, but you get to the same point.
Different routes.
You get to
same
ultimate
destination.
And do you know where that destination? So I would argue in the middle is order, right? Some form of order. This big cluster in the middle, there's some form of order where we can navigate it as a society, and we can have different viewpoints, but we can, ameliorate them, and we can both come out better off from discussing them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So some form of order. The further and further and further out you go,
the further opinions differ, and the further the argument goes from calm to
chaos.
Yes.
Chaos. Order. Chaos. The extremities of. Yeah, so, yeah, in a nutshell.
All right, we've come to the end of this interview.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you soon again.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aberdeen.
All right, thank you so much. All right.
Take care.